Hi, Bob, and welcome to the Real Talk.
Rob, thanks so much for having me.
As I said, I found you through a friend of Steve Cholas, a friend, and I've been really kind of nerding out to all the content you put out there, to the cloud formation of cloud wars, everything. Talk about one of the biggest industries, but less talked about industries in the world right now, especially technology and cloud computing. And as you know, a expert you putting out there. So thank you for being on.
Yeah, Rob, it's a pleasure. I'm delighted to be here. I share your passion for. I'm not so much the nerd type because I can't always understand the technology, but I sure do think it's extraordinary what it's doing for our lives, both personally and professionally.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a technology we're in, especially from the pandemic, and everything has been accelerated in the last year and a half, 2 years into technology and the cloud computing, AI, and compute power in general. So I wanted to take a little step back and introduce yourself a little bit. And then how did starting from founding, coming to Cloud Wars and going backwards a little bit, how did you get into technology?
Yeah, well, Rob, we're going back into ancient history here, a long, long time ago. But it was I was getting out of college right around the time that the PCs were introduced. Mm-hmm. And when I was in college, I had always wanted to write about science. I've been fascinated by that. I took a lot of science classes in college. And then I saw about this thing of these, new computers people could carry around. And from that, it just became an opportunity to understand the industry. Even though I'm not a technologist, I've always just been fascinated, as I said, with this impact it has. And what's happened over the last year and a half, Rob, in everybody's lives, not just the technology industry, but 3 billion people on Earth have been touched by this. And it's just remarkable to be able to get a front row seat observing this and talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see from I was going back to your history, what you're doing, and on your LinkedIn profile, looking at it, and see some of the accolades and things that you've gone through. And of course, I think your stint at Oracle and Larry Ellison, and getting to that for. So tell us a little bit about that and how that came about because of your interest and insights in journalism and writing about the technology in general.
Rob, thanks. It's funny. I had been covering the tech industry for a number of years, writing about it, written thousands of articles, and given talks all over the world. And then I decided, right as happened with so many industries, the internet was really changing the media industry. Mm-hmm. And to me, it was less the media industry, and the company where I worked was less interested in sort of risk taking and growth, and they had to hunker down and change things. That's not always so interesting for me, Rob. So I thought, well, let me go over into the tech industry. Instead of seeing it from the outside, how about seeing it from the inside? So I worked at SAP for a year and helped them communicate more about their customers and the business value and innovation that they were creating, and maybe a little less so about their code. And then I was recruited from SAP to go over to Oracle, and it was actually Larry Ellison who did the recruiting. And I'm not trying to be a name dropper there, Rob, but it's just a tribute to Larry's vision. What he told me was, for 35 years, we've made very technical stuff and we've communicated in a very technical language to a very technical audience. But now the world's changing and we've got to start to talk to business people. So we need to change how we talk to the world. And it was a wonderful 4.5, 5 years at Oracle. But then I got the entrepreneurial bug, wanted to work for myself. So I started a consulting company, and that's still going well. And then 2.5 years ago, I started a second company, Cloud Wars Media, which has been a blast. I'm really enjoying that very much.
Wow, I can bet that Larry Ellison vision and going to the Oracle ecosystem and being able to network and being part of one of the chief communicators, right? You were communications, right? And you were talking to all the movers and shakers in the world and in the technology space.
Yeah, and seeing it from the inside, Rob, from Oracle's point of view, was very interesting there as well. Because one of the things that Larry said to me, as I was getting started in this job, he said, if you're going to succeed at this job, you're going to make a huge number of enemies inside the company. And I said, okay, tell me, how does that play out? And he said, well, we're engineers. And he said, when we love the stuff we create, we love the code, and your job is going to be to say that we have to talk more about what our customers are doing and how we're helping our customers, not just about this incredible technology we're creating. But Rob, I think it's been a really healthy and forward-looking development for the entire tech industry, right? That the magic of the code and the technology is all great, but it doesn't mean anything if nobody buys it. So why don't we talk more about the people who are buying it and what they're doing with it and how they're going out to change the world with the help of that technology. So I think it's a good thing for the industry to get out of its own way a little bit and see the world from the outside in instead of inside out.
I completely agree. And it's funny as you talk about the engineers, because they're in their own ecosystem and their own place that they create technology and design, and they're excited. But it's the other spot of listening to the customers, what solutions they need, and being forward thinking, anticipating. And of course, sometimes that disconnect comes with engineers saying, oh, your customer we would need this. And they're like, no, this is how it should work. And that kind of disconnect, I can see where that the politics, as you would say, come into a big corporation like that.
Yeah. Rob, there was a phenomenal scholar and thinker at the University of Michigan who died before his time about 10 years ago, but his name is C.K. Prahalad. And one of the things that C.K. said, Rob, because you used the word anticipation, which I think is so critical. And C.K. said, really, the business world has gone through three phases. The initial one was make and sell. And he said the second phase was listen and react. And he said the phase we're moving into now is one of anticipate and lead, where companies have to be so wired in to what their customers are doing that they move in lockstep with their customers instead of waiting and always trying to play catch up. And I think one of the most interesting things, Rob, in the tech industry today, and you know this from your role and what you do and what you see all the time, is it used to be, companies would kind of take their time, right? We see what's going on in the world. We've done a lot of surveys. We'll go back in the lab, we'll create something, and then we'll introduce it to the world. Well, what the world's changing so fast that process now, sometimes you introduce the thing and everybody says, yeah, that was cool like about a year ago, but I've moved on from that. So what I think is so interesting, Rob, today, one of the most interesting things about the tech industry is they're putting the customers right in the center of the product development process, co-creation, co-innovation, so that it's not this constant guesswork. I'll try this, pull back, react. So it's really anticipate and lead. And that's, I think, one of the reasons it's so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter if that's external or internal. It is anticipate, lead, ask questions, and listen. That's the way.
Curious.
Yeah, and be curious, and that's the thing. Curiosity, as all engineers, I was listening to another a person talking, Lex Friedman. I don't know if you know Lex Friedman. He's really had a podcast. And he's talking about curiosity and how engineers or scientists at age that keeps them young. They're even in their older age, they're still young because they're curious to solve problems and do technology. So that's what they're always young at heart, because that's what curiosity is. As a child, you're always curious. Why? How does this work? Solve problems. How do we solve this? And as the engineering mindset or technology or forward thinking is the curiosity of moving forward. And the only way to do that is to listen to around you, anticipate, lead, and make changes for technology and what we're in today.
Well, Rob, I see here, on your screen on the player there, it's got your name and then the chief, right? Well, one of the things that the chief has to be able to do today in any organization is ensure that that exact sort of curiosity and that high-level view from a company out to its customers, but also inside the companies, right?
Yeah.
The history, right, of these sort of big corporate hierarchies is this department did this. They knew a little bit about what the next department did. They knew very little about what happened 2 steps away, and they knew nothing about what happened down there. But today, with the demands that we as either consumers or business customers are putting on business, that's the structure and the workflow and the visibility inside companies has to be so different. Get it all focused outside on what's going on with the customer and, pull everybody together on that. So again, I think corporate culture's changed so much in the last few years, and I think it's going to continue to evolve over the next few.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think the verticals have shifted from being vertical to more horizontal. And that's the number one thing in the management shifts in the last 10 to 20 years is that shift and that change. And it's been tough because you have one group of thought leaders and another group of thought leaders, the new incoming thought leaders, and the generation change, and it's being ahead of that and thinking like, we're getting more horizontal based. The verticals, it's like, and everybody has a part in it. Sales and marketing aren't separate anymore; they're together. They have to be synonymous. These are types of things that, especially big corporate, they worked, autonomously on their own, and there wasn't really any type of integration between them. So now today with technology, it's the number one thing. How can we anticipate customers' needs? How can we move forward when not everybody is horizontally communicating? Just going to one point of a vertical, and then that vertical point makes decisions, and nobody really understands what each department's working on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Rob, if I could switch positions with you for a second. You've talked a lot about curiosity. What are you most curious about today?
Well, that brings us to this. I'm curious about technology in general because our company in general is electronics distribution. We've been in this a family business, been in for 40 years. We do the components. We're the hardware. We're the hardware that powers all the softwares and all the gadgets that we do. And my curiosity was even as a child is how do things work? Taking things apart. I got into remote control cars, RC cars, taking them apart, racing them, and curiosity of keep growing. And as we get older and go into this, is my curiosity is looking at engineering and technology. What brings me to all the softwares, because of course the software is the sexy, as you say, sexy part. Everybody likes the gooey stuff from the software, but when it goes to the hardware, our business that we're in is the foundation of the systems, right? And how do we increase connectivity, compute power for the software to operate? So that's where my curiosity really stands into that, is to understand it, which also brings me to the cloud computing, which is so powerful these days, of compute power and how we are moving infrastructure from the ground, or as you say, from the ground, and moving into a cloud to a brain that collects data, that can make decisions in the modular basis. That's why I would love for you to explain a little bit about Cloud Wars and what your mission is and what your vision was creating something like that to inform the masses of what's going on with technology.
Sure, Rob. A little bit of the background I had given that, and clearly I'm not a technologist, but I know enough about it to be able to understand and be conversant in it. But to me, the bigger thing was, what is the impact that all this remarkable stuff is going to have on the lives of individuals and where they work and how they learn, how they experience the world around them, how they communicate, and how they create and innovate. And working at SAP for a year and then working at Oracle for 5 years, I had I got very much the impression that the cloud thing was being underplayed, that I thought it was going to be much bigger. It wasn't just like people say, oh yeah, the tech industry goes through, there's this thing, then this thing, and they're all phases or all fads and they come and go. I said, I don't think that's going to happen here with the cloud. I think this is really going to be revolutionary, and the impact that it's going to have over time is going to continue to increase. So I thought about that, and I had 5 great years at Oracle, but by the time I left there, Rob, I was about 60 years old, and I said, if I don't get out and start to do this entrepreneurial thing soon, I'm going to run out of time here. So the time is now. So I wanted to jump out and do my own stuff, started Cloud Wars, and what I enjoy so much is seeing how the impact of this technology is reaching more and more and more and more people around the world in more profound ways. To me, that's just been, it's a privilege. It's like a little kid's Christmas gift to be able to be up close with this industry all the time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's fascinating, and the people you talk to, the thought leadership people behind it, and it comes across in all your content you put out there, of the wars. I mean, we can get all into this, between the Microsofts, the Amazons, the IBMs, the new guys coming up like Snowflake, and everything coming to the board. And what is really cloud computing? Can you give us like a basic cloud 101 or macro level of really what is cloud?
Yeah, Rob, where I live in New York, down along the East River, in a neighborhood called Dumbo, but there was a cardboard company founded there in the late 1800s. The guy was a brilliant inventor, and he built this factory that not only made the cardboard, but he had his own powerhouse there. He made his own electricity because he needed his own electricity to power the new sorts of machines that he was making and the new sorts of processes. And that was, in a way, 130 years ago. It's not that long ago, but you would have companies that made their own electricity. And today that seems silly. And I suspect not too far in the future, people are going to say, wait a minute, if you're a retail company, you went out and built your own IT factory, why didn't you just tap into the compute power that somebody else has? One of these giant companies that made it. So that's really the transition we're in. The huge technology companies, Rob, and like if you look at Google and Amazon and Microsoft, the three biggest cloud infrastructure providers, I think the little guy in that crowd is Google, right? They have a market cap of only 1.6 trillion, and the other two are close to $2 trillion. So I think they can probably, if they're setting out to do cloud infrastructure, they can probably do it better than a retail company or an insurance company or a construction company. And that's really the basis of it, allowing people to get the benefits of world-class, modern, hyperscale technology without having to build the factory and create all that stuff themselves.
Yeah, so you're talking about compute, the building the compute power to process infrastructure internally, because a lot of companies, everything's switching, even manufacturing, like Industry 4.0, digitalization of processing. And it's at the end of the day that the scale of compute is getting less and less expensive. It's getting more and more attractive to these companies like Google and Microsoft. They're building the brains. Like, we have the power. You could just feed us the data and we can build the infrastructure for you off premises than having on premises that reduce your capital costs, and you can focus on your IP and we'll just focus on the data management, correct?
There's a lot of that, Rob, absolutely. Yeah. And you've got teams with some pretty big IT organizations, and there's a lot of incredibly talented, capable people in there. But because of the requirements of on-premises technology, they're often forced to do these jobs that are sort of very mundane. They're essential, but they're not challenging. They're not high value to the business, but they have to be done. Now, if you move over to the cloud model, those people can move up to higher value positions in the organization. They can start doing more about innovation, more about customers, more about revenue growth, more about some powerful new types of services and opportunities for their own company, instead of monitoring things and patching things and testing. That all should be automated, and let those creative human minds, those curiosities, as you described them, let them go up and deal with bigger and more interesting, more valuable issues.
Yeah, I mean, that simple explanation, I cannot agree more. I mean, that is, you're right. Focus on the R&D in what you do, and we'll focus on powering it, giving you the power to do the algorithms and then the mathematical equations that basically takes to run data. And that's the scale of cloud and all the services. Because I know as a consumer, as a basic consumer, they're like, what is cloud? Like, like Gmail. Well, Gmail's in a cloud. Like, these are basics can come to be. And Microsoft 365 is a cloud-based solutions. And I think there's kind of sometimes the basic consumer is not so, I would say, informed, or sometimes has an intellectual curiosity to understand really what cloud is. So that's why I wanted to give that synopsis and talk to you really to really go for that 101, that macro version of what is cloud, how does it work, and what is it for our future, right? How is it going to build the infrastructure to move forward? How is it going to solve problems in sciences and mathematics? And we are, fortunately, in the U.S., one of the most powerful countries of computing. Of course, some other countries, but a lot of other countries out there don't have that power, but the Googles and Microsofts are open to democratizing cloud, as you would say, right? Democratizing cloud. So in your perspective and your question I have for you, for your knowledge and your experience, what have you seen in the last, say, 3 to 5 years of the transformation of cloud, and really what these top companies' vision and missions are for the consumer down to basic business side?
Oh, Rob, that's a great question. I think in some ways, like today, here in the middle of 2021, I sometimes think of the cloud, and I think business leaders should think of the cloud as the reimagination machine, right? Can you substitute cloud for on-premise technology and save some money? Of course. And can you do that and, increase your efficiency a little bit? Of course. And that's all fine. But the bigger value, the higher value, is in things like speed and simplicity. There was a first time I heard about cloud computing, Rob, it was a story involving the research, the scientific and clinical labs research team at Eli Lilly.
Okay.
And they had started to use some Amazon compute services. And the head of the clinical research team at Eli Lilly told us that he said, fundamentally, what the cloud has done here, it has changed our concept of time. And he said before, because to spin up a really aggressive new experiment, we would have to spend 6 or 8 months buying the servers, setting up the servers, provisioning the servers, buying the software, blah, 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 all that stuff. He said, now with the cloud, we can do that in 6 hours, at the most 6 days. And we've got more power to take on higher level experiments, more complex experiments. So he said, we had trained ourselves to think small because it took so long to put together a big computer network to handle it. So instead of taking all that time, we thought small and we could do stuff in 3 or 4 months. He said, now we can do it in 3 or 4 hours. So we've begun to tackle bigger problems, more interesting problems, more complex problems that are going to affect the lives of more people. So, Rob, it's things like that that are astonishing. And that was a reimagination thing. The other part is, Rob, the first time that the term artificial intelligence or AI was mentioned was 1956. That's 65 years ago. But to most people on Earth, AI has been this sort of myth, and it's this scary boogeyman, that's going to come and robots will take over and nobody will have jobs and blah, all that sort of silly stuff. But now, Rob, AI is touching the lives of, hundreds of millions, perhaps billions of people around the world, because the cloud has become the perfect delivery vehicle that allows AI to come out and touch the lives of a staggering number of people, because businesses can now use it via the cloud, whereas before it was as inaccessible as Pluto. So I think in those ways, if business leaders think about the cloud, not just as a replacement, not just as a cost lowerer, but as an imagination lifter, an imagination machine, I think the sky's the limit.
Yeah, I mean, that's a couple things you hit there. It's like time to market.
Yes.
You can increase your time to market on any type of creation. You're an inventor, you're a company trying to infrastructure change. Your time to market to do that, just like you said, can go into a day or into days to do that. Now, or weeks, or something will take you a year to build infrastructure and do it, can take you into less than a month to do something like that, because we're moving so fast. The technology, and let the big guys, the big cloud computing, do the mathematical equations, and you guys focus on engineering, will power it, and your time to market be faster. And that's why I think a lot of software companies, these development companies these days, app-based, modular-based, they're coming out left and right because they have the compute power to solve those problems, to be able to bring the product, whatever the gadget they're trying to, or technology they're trying to create, to market. It's extremely fascinating.
Yes, and then Rob, now both at the level of like big pharmaceutical companies and the issues you just described, then you look at a lot of restaurants, right? 15 months ago, their business was just humming along as it had for the past 15 years. All of a sudden, wham, they can't have people in their restaurant. So I got a choice. I go out of business, or I figure a new way to serve the public. Well, that all had to be through online reservations, online ordering, online pickups, online deliveries. And they adapted incredibly fast. That just would not have been possible in the old world of technology. And curbside pickup, right? Like the big home improvement stores. They never thought about that, right? It would have been, they would have said, heck, no, we don't do that. It'd be too expensive. Now it's an indispensable part of their strategy, right? Customer experience has been raised to a level where they say, if you don't offer curbside pickup, I'm going to take my money elsewhere. So you're right. It changes everything about the business models.
Yeah, I mean, I think the pandemic just accelerated that. But even prior to pandemic, we started getting the Ubers and Lyfts and DoorDashes and all these things. And they were coming, the convenience, the processing, and they need compute power. And because computing got so powerful, mapping and all this, they can do the compute power to just put it to your handheld device and call, I need a ride, or I need a transportation of something instantly. And that, and going down to the pandemic, it just quantified, magnified dramatically. And then all other retailers, consumer people that sell to consumers, just like, wow, we can change, we can accelerate this and give the customer experience, just like you said, to the customer. And it builds scale. We can scale faster.
Yeah.
We can scale. And it's sometimes you think like the consumer, they're not going to want that because it's as you said, the visionary. We go back to the type of vision, looking forward. Some people don't know they want it because they don't like change. And when change happens, we all, our human habitual mindsets don't like change. Don't like to change the way we go to work, even though one way will be 5 minutes shorter. We just like the same way because that's just the way we like it, And the curiosity only leads you to the new ways. If you're not curious, you go down the same path every single day.
Yeah. And right. And as each day you go down that same path, Rob, what happens, right? Your sense of wonder or possibility or vision, it gets narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower. And so that's the world, and you don't want to stray left or right because, well, it's uncomfortable. But, you think about kids today and the world that they're going to grow up in where they can not only they have ongoing conversations with kids their age all across the world. They play games with them. They share ideas with them. They co-create stuff with them. They start new companies with them. And there's some things, reasonable concerns. Are kids today spending too much time in front of screens? Okay, well, before that it was too much time in front of TV. Before that, too much time in front of radio. Before that, who knows what it was. But I am a big optimist. I'm a believer in, the human spirit and the human capability to deal with these problems as they come along. Not to be Pollyanna and say there's nothing there, but we can take care of that. I mean, look at what happened with the, the vaccine treatment over the last, year and a half or so. 9 months. And if you talk to somebody 2 years ago, the most knowledgeable people in the world of pharmaceuticals, you said, could you get some out in 9? They said, absolutely flat out impossible. But it's not. And we did it.
Yeah. And that's because thanks to the technology scale and the advancements of compute, that we can medical miracles, we can make miracles happen today. And that's what the scale of, I fear, like a lot of people fear, just like you brought up, like AI and all this. I'm like, well, you don't understand the advancements. And if we can democratize this on a platform in the world will be a better place because we can solve everyday challenges and problems that everybody faces, making things more efficient, cost efficient, our lives healthier. We can, uncover studies and things we can do because some of these people don't realize, 10 years ago, one petaflop was about $100 million. Today, it's about $50,000, right? It's 1 quadrillion, processes. And that's just a small server. There are things 100 times bigger than that. These are the supercomputing, and you imagine the smartest computers, what they can do, and what type of algorithm, because it's all mathematics. And that's one thing a lot of people think, it's all math. At the end of the day, that's just what it is. It solves problems and does simulations 1 billion times over. And it can give you a calculated result of this can happen or this can happen. And it's sometimes when I try to also explain that to some of my friends or people, I'm like, you don't understand what is happening. And I think it's coming to fruition now with the pandemic and everybody now being aware, the awareness of what's coming to be. Like technology is changing, our worlds are changing. We're conversing over internets now. We are having meetings. We can do presentations of 1,000 people, and this is through simple technology. This isn't through. You don't need a petaflop computer to do that, And these are things that really it's fascinating. And for my self curiosity, and also running into you and looking at what you're doing for cloud infrastructure, it should be aware. And I think you're doing a great thing spreading that awareness because someone needs to do it. And I think you're one of those mediums of people to spread that awareness.
Well, Rob, thank you. And again, I would just say it is such an extraordinary business to be able to analyze and monitor and watch it and see the impact that it's having on the lives, the health, the education, the uplifting a sense of opportunity for people in every country on earth. So it's a privilege. I'm very, very lucky.
Yeah, it's fast. So tell me a little bit more about, like, I was looking at the battlegrounds. What is this in the cloud battleground all about? I looking at, you've been promoting this and talking about this. Really, what does that do? And the top big players in the industry come in, how does that work?
Sure. Rob, it's interesting too, sort of a corporate evolution. I mean, corporate, my company evolution. I'm certainly not a corporation, but we did not have at CloudWars an events business. So I did a partnership with a company called Dynamic Communities, which does events and related content in the tech space. They're terrific at doing events. So we got together and we said this, one of the hottest areas in the cloud are these industry clouds. So there's one for financial services or manufacturing, healthcare, retail, logistics, any sort of industry, right? Where the new cloud applications, it's not just like you create one and a manufacturing company uses it here and a healthcare company, but now they're these purpose-built, very precise, very specific applications for your company, your industry, and all of its unique needs. So that's become one of the hottest and most rapidly advancing parts of the whole cloud market. So the idea that I had with John Seifert, who's the CEO at Dynamic Communities, we said, why don't we get a forum? So we're going to have a virtual digital event on June 23rd that the top players in this field can come, and each gets 20 minutes to answer 5 questions we've put out, so that for the customers and the buyers here, I think, Rob, this gives them a chance to see in one single place what's going on among some of the top companies in the world. What are they offering, and who's going to be the right choice for these buyers who are going to be the audiences for this industry cloud battleground? So that's pretty cool in that sector. And we think that this can be a model going forward to help bring more information in a shorter period of time to buyers out there in our fast changing world.
Wow. Yeah. Your vision. You nailed it. Your vision. I'm profound of I'm profound. It's like, wow, that's right, because there probably is no platform. Like, people have hackathons or people in and all, breaking certain codes and things, but cloud computing, you're right. How can they bring on, because every cloud company has a value. They bring a service. Sometimes it doesn't fit 100% with the customer, right? So having a platform that you can go through 5 to 10 different companies who have solutions and say, okay, pitch me, what are your strengths and core values of what you're trying to go down? And at that point, you can align yourself with the correct partner in that space.
That's exactly right, Rob. And, some people ask me, they say, well, cloud wars sound so mean and harsh. Why don't you make it like cloud market? And I said, if you want to do cloud market, go do cloud market. I think, and I've worked inside some of these companies and I've talked to all of them, they see it as absolutely, it is a war here for leadership and dominance. I think that's a good thing in business, right? Because you don't go to war half-heartedly. You go to war with everything you have. And I think these big companies are pouring tens of billions of dollars into research, innovation, product development, and the success. The big winners, Rob, in the cloud wars are the customers, because they get the benefit of all this unbridled free market competition, the very best solutions for them at the best prices that are going to make those customer companies more successful than they could have been without these great innovations. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with the Cloud Wars name. And then it was John Seifert from Dynamic Communities, my partner on this, who came in and said, if there's a war going on, let's showcase that in this industry cloud battleground. So it's been a great partnership.
Creating competition, it always makes us better because we strive. We keep striving and innovation and being out there and coming out with solutions and keep curious and forward thinking. As I said, it comes back to curiosity, anticipation, and all these come to play. And I that's great. That's fantastic. I would say, because a lot of the big businesses out there, they're looking for solutions out there. And I think this could be a great trend. And you're starting, as I said, entrepreneurial side, a great platform for these companies to really show off.
Well, Rob, you know that there's probably never been a business more competitive than, electronics distribution, right? That's been around a long time. It's hard hitting. And you understand the value of this. And I think in this new digital economy that we're moving into, some companies in the past thought, well, I can get big enough that creates a moat. I can make barriers to entry more and more difficult. That stuff doesn't exist anymore, right? Or a big company could say, I'll lock in all the channels of distribution. I won't let outsiders in. All that stuff's gone. You get a great idea, you can reach thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people all over the world who want to buy your stuff. So I think this wave of entrepreneurship is extraordinary here. And every company has a chance to do this, to set its own pace. So those old ways, build a moat, barriers to entry, I'll lock out this, I'll lock out that. That's all gone. The competition from little companies, vibrant, dynamic companies, new ideas, better ways, better approaches. As you said, the competition is going to make all of us better. And again, I think that's one of the most exciting things about what we get to do with Cloud Wars, to see how a lot of this stuff is coming to life every single day.
And yeah, you bring up, I think visibility is visibility at scale. And that's the thing. The digital world and the pandemic has really, and a lot of companies, people have jumped onto it, but a lot of people didn't realize, especially you could bring back to the distribution semiconductor industry, there was no visibility. The big guys, the big tier ones, they think they grab all of it, they have all the business and but they were kind of left behind, like, oh, wow. We have to be way more upfront digitally. We have to put our people front. We have to have the brand of the sales and engineers. It's synonymous with the brand of the company, not just put the brand of the company first, because people still like doing business with people, and it's a human business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Rob, that's something too, that there's something about the cloud that enables a leveling aspect. Right. And I'm not blaming any. If you're a big company and legally, ethically, you can do whatever you can to, ensure your market share stays up here, great, go do it. But there's something about the cloud now that I think is spurring entrepreneurship, not just in the tech industry, but in every other industry, because suddenly every company, whatever size you are, and you talked about this a little while ago, you have access to the most powerful computing resources, AI resources, data resources, testing analysis through the cloud that the biggest companies on earth have. And I think that's spurring innovation. And it's also forcing the big companies to change how they behave, or else they're going to get sliced up by these smaller, faster, nimbler, more customer-oriented companies coming in and just chewing them up. So again, I think this is one of those ways in which the cloud has been a benefactor to everybody, whether a company or consumers.
Yeah, you're right. The leveling the playing field, and that's for everybody too, because there's a lot of ingenuity, engineering, and brains and intellect behind a lot of things. Sometimes it's not brought to the surface. It's because they just didn't have the power or the compute power to reach. And now you can go on and just get the compute power and come up with some. It could be people's life-changing, innovation that maybe would have died and would have basically died because that person didn't have accessibility to that. And, it comes, as you say, it comes to education, all of this, democratizing that type of compute power for leveling the playing field so we can bring more innovation to scale.
Hey, Rob, let me ask you a question here. As the Zoom, as the company was already doing quite well before the pandemic. Then the pandemic hits and Zoom becomes a verb. It becomes, a household word all over Why didn't one of the big telecommunications companies do what Zoom did? Why didn't one of the big carriers jump in here and figure this out? Why was it a relatively young, hard-driven entrepreneurial company that figured this out? What did they see that the big companies didn't see? And I think, Rob, it goes right back to your idea about, I could go this way to work, I could go this way to work, but I'm used to going this way, so I'll just go that way because it's what I know. And I'm not so interested, I'm not so curious about what goes on over here. That, again, that's deadly, but good for Zoom.
Yeah. It all comes from leadership at the end, and the vision. We need to make change, because when you have a big conglomerate company with many different levels, the kind of vision, the mission of the company changes because they don't hear from the bottom. So when it's very vertical, I can bring it back to a point like Tesla. You have the chief is Elon Musk. He's involved in everything. His hands are in everything. But then you go to a bigger automotive company, energy company, there's the chief and there's many layers between it. There's kind of a separation. So that's changing the field, that the leader gets his hands dirty, figures it out, even, speaks for it, makes sure what's going on, make sure that innovation or that mission is always to move it forward, because it can get lost between levels. And that really is I can see a lot of new technology companies coming to fruition, startups to, billion-dollar companies. The leader of the company is fully involved, or the leaders of whoever the innovation is, the C-level people are fully involved into the everyday
work
processes.
Yeah. And they've got to be able, in parallel with that, to be able to create and infuse and sustain a culture that wards off that notion of, we might have good ideas here, but we don't have a mechanism that allows them to go up. Because by the time they get through the first 3 or 4 levels, we're going to beat those good ideas back down so that nobody's going to come up with any good ideas. And then just people, they come in, punch clock, finish, go. And if they are talented and ambitious and smart, they're going to go to some other company. So it's interesting these days, right? There's the technological capabilities that are more incredible than ever before, but all that technology is worth zero if you don't have leadership and a culture and a mindset and great people who feel free and open and unfettered to be able to do their very best work. All the technology in the world isn't going to help those companies. They're on the way, you know, they're a dinosaur with 2 legs in the tar pit and they don't even know it.
Yeah, and it's an efficiency of spending money in R&D, because some people, let's just throw money at it, we'll fix it. And the problem is, if you don't have the vision, it's never going to be fixed. You're much more efficient in that. And I always say, even with my team on that aspect, is we want to surround ourselves with smarter people that fill in gaps. I shouldn't be the smartest person in the world, even though I'm the chief of the company. I'm going to have a lot of smarter people around me in certain areas that can fill my weaknesses and gaps and our vision and what we want to go into. And that's the new trend of business that has to really change, is you have to surround yourself with just open-minded people that, of course, you're not going to always agree, because everybody, that's the world of life. You know, you have to agree, but future thinking, technology savvy, and really understand to bring more horizontal base of leadership to really have that message. But question I have for you, wrapping this up a little bit, is what do you see in the next, say, 2 to 5 years of industry trends in cloud computing? What do you see what are the newcomers, and what do you think is going to really transform that?
Yeah, Rob, I think toward the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned the company Snowflake.
Yeah.
Right. So in a couple weeks ago, they had their most recent quarterly earnings call, and one of the numbers that came out of that was they are projecting now that for their calendar year, which will end, I think, January 31st, they're projecting revenue of just over $1 billion. Right. In some respects, it's a very, very big company. In other respects, relative to the other tech companies, they're really pretty small. But their revenue grew last quarter 110%, right, to $214 million. They've created a new category called the data cloud. So they're not trying to do what Amazon does, or Microsoft, or Google, or Oracle, or SAP, or Salesforce. They've created this thing called the data cloud, where it says and one of their taglines is sort of like, all your data, all your users. And the promise there is, for years, the tech industry, Rob, has been talking about these things that will lead to the democratization of data. What we were talking about a minute ago about company culture, everybody wants to be able to make an impact. Well, you can't make an impact too much in a business in today's world unless you've got some access to data. How do I understand what's going on? How can I, manipulate that data, use that data, reason over that data to come up with great ideas? So I think one of the coolest things that's going on in the cloud these days is data cloud. And it didn't come from one of the big giant companies. It came from this zany little startup that's coming in and threatening and challenging the biggest companies in the world, the most powerful companies in the world, because Snowflake is saying, I have a better idea. I have a way to create more value for businesses in the type of value they need and want right now around data than you big companies can do, because you've got yourself so caught up in what you've been doing the last few years, you didn't see this new thing coming. So I think that's one extraordinary. And the second one I'd offer you is what we talked about a minute ago with these industry clouds. Yeah. It's a remarkable area, Rob. And even to the CEO of Microsoft, the biggest, most powerful cloud vendor on earth, the CEO, Satya Nadella, a few months ago said, we are now an industry first company. Okay. So those are two pretty potent and exciting areas.
Yeah, I mean, that comes with the leadership of moving, but you just said a smaller player, a little more innovative, because it's also harder for companies like Microsoft or Amazon, or even Google, to pivot a little bit, because they've built a lot of infrastructure. For them to change, it's a lot. And a smaller company that has a little more flexibility of building infrastructure and listening to customers, what's out there, and what are the I would say that filling those gaps, like, okay, you know what, these are all the gaps, we'll fill the gaps, we'll make this system and platform. And I think there will probably be many more coming to industry because that's competition. They're going to keep coming. Okay, Snowflake comes up to a point, but another person comes in and say, oh, we can even optimize that, quantify even more than Snowflake can. And that's what creates the innovation moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's amazing. It's a very, very as I said, exciting industry of how we're doing compute power. And we haven't even gotten AI is a whole nother, just how AI works with compute power. At the end of the day is compute. Everything needs compute, and our lives today are controlled by that, because today, simple cloud basis is we cannot operate without a mobile device. Our lives are entangled into a mobile device, you know, and we cannot do anything with it because, and all this is connected to a cloud and multiple clouds because they're all app-based. These are communicating between cloud-based systems, you know, and solving problems that you have, or I want to go here, or I want to do this, or mathematical equations, and giving it to you. So it's the future is bright, and I really appreciate you coming on. And a question I always ask all my guests is, what message do you have for the new generation out there?
Oh, I'd say, Rob, I believe this has come across so far in our conversation, but I'm wildly optimistic about the future. And I think for young people coming into this, if every generation feels like you can write your own ticket, you can do whatever you want, this generation can not only do that, but they have more options for doing that in a wider variety of ways than ever before. So I would say, you know, stay very hungry, stay very humble. It's just as easy to dream a big dream as a little dream, and have a blast while you're doing it.
Yeah. So how can everybody reach you as on your website? How can people get to your website? What platforms and publications do you have?
Rob, thank you. Our website is Cloud Wars. You can find that at cloudwars.co. I'm at Bob Evans IT on LinkedIn and Twitter, and pretty much everything we do you can find through those mediums, and as well as for the Industry Cloud Battleground. If you just search that name, that'll take you to the Dynamic Communities registration page. It's June 23rd.
And I can say, just follow him on LinkedIn. If you want to follow, you get dynamic content every day, and see Bob's handsome face talking about all the industry challenges, what's going on. And, you know, because as I said, it's a medium tool, and you do a real great job at it, because it's not long, quick 3-minute clip. You nail it, and it informs, keeps everybody up there, because we're all busy these days. So this little clips, it's about clips these days. Everybody knows that's how we get our information. So and it's good information. So thanks again, Bob. Thanks for coming on. It's been so fascinating. Can't wait to maybe we could do this again 6 months to a year and say, hey, in the last 6 months this changed. You know, in last year the whole world changed and cloud computing got so much more powerful. Imagine what happens in the next year. Where are we going? It's just getting bigger and bigger.
Rob, thank you. It's a privilege to be on with you. It's a lot of fun, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Thanks again, guys. Well, we'll see you guys on the next Real Talk.